Houston, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Hey, so I'm a big fan, and I just like probably anybody else that's come across your work. Like I just scroll on TikTok and I watch all your videos, and I
hmm
told my producer I was like, we got to get this dude on because I think I'm like your number one fan. So I have a lot of questions for you. First of all, have you had a bunch of interviews where people going, "Hey, Houston, I love you because of your TikTok"?
You know what? I've done a couple radio shows, but this is probably like the first podcast that I've been on, so I'm very excited to talk about it. I love just like finding random interesting stories about college football because I think college football is very unique in the personalities and the weird cultures that just surround the sport. So just all around the edges of college football, there's so much fun stuff to talk about that, an average person who, watches an Alabama game on a Saturday may not be aware of the insanity that's happening, in a small FCS college in South Carolina or, somewhere else across the country. There's a coach playing quarterback because their school ran out of, starting quarterback. So they needed someone with an extra year of eligibility. So that's the kind of stuff that I love, and I love talking about it.
So at the Corner Blitz, I mean that's his name on TikTok. And do you have a background? I think why I like what you do, 'cause you just put your head up there and it's behind you. There's like a screenshot or you roll through pictures. Do you have a background in anything sports related? Because in the most refreshing way, you don't sound like everybody else that does.
Well, this is the honest truth of how I got into it. So when I first started dating my now wife and my then girlfriend, 8 or so years ago, she was appalled at the amount of football that I was watching on a Saturday. So I had to make a deal with her. I was like, listen, if I can find some way to get paid for watching football, then this has to be, a happy medium. We have to, that works. So she agreed to that. So I started, finding blogs to write for, and I wrote for Saturday Down South. I wrote, for wherever I could find to just try to, make some use of, my knowledge of the game and how much I love college football. And then, I started a TikTok channel, and that gave me the most freedom to really talk about what I was most interested in. And, I could just post at any time that I wanted. And that's kind of when I started to gain a following and build a little mini community there that was really fun for me.
Yeah, I'm mayor of that community, by the way. They don't know it, but I
I
love
appreciate it.
it.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about a few things here. And this first story that you were doing recently, I'm from Arkansas, so I know about this coach a little bit, but the Presbyterian College. Will you tell all my
Mhm.
friends here and then also the people that listen to this show kind of why you say that's one of the most interesting programs in college football?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, this guy, Kevin Kelly, was a high school coaching legend in Arkansas because he had a philosophy where he would never punt the football. He would never kick an extra point, always go for two. He would always onside kick. It kind of felt like, if you turn a football program into like an NFT or something, it was like Web 3.0 version of a football team. He seemed way, 100 years ahead of what everyone else was doing. And he had support even when he was in Arkansas as a high school coach. People like Bill Belichick, the biggest names in the sport, would drop by and speak to him. And eventually he got hired by an FCS program, Presbyterian College. And it was a big deal. I think Bill Belichick actually introduced him at his press conference there. And so I was aware of him and I was following him closely. And his very first game, his very first ever college football game where he was keeping that same strategy, he went out and his team won 72-0. And
Dang.
so I saw that and I'm like, okay, that the scores like that happen in college football sometimes. You could just be playing a terrible team. Week two, he comes out, his team scores 90 points.
Oh my.
And so at this point, I'm thinking, okay, this guy has figured out, within 2 years, every NFL team is going to be doing what this guy is doing. So that's when I started going all in on the Corner Blitz, talking about this guy, and I would break down his offense. And even his offense, he would, how NFL teams at the end of games, they would just do like the 20 laterals to, as a instead of doing a Hail Mary. That was like a staple of his offense. He would throw it to a tight end who would pitch it to a running back coming out of the backfield who would then lateral it across the field. It would just be like on a 1st and 10 in the fourth, in the first quarter. So it was a wild team. And so I was very excited. In week three, he was playing his first conference opponent, a team called Campbell. And so I was going to do a TikTok live during the game. I was very excited for it. And by the end of the first quarter, he was losing 42-0. He once he started playing common opponents, for whatever reason, they couldn't get any points. Teams would figure out how to do it, and because of him always going for fourth downs, he wouldn't just lose games. He would lose games by like 40 and 50 points because it would just be a snowball effect. And by the end of the year last year, his kids would be coming up to him and begging to punt the football and begging to just do a regular kick because they were, couldn't win a game in conference. So he ended up leaving Presbyterian last year and heading back to Arkansas. But I hope, someone finds a nugget of what he did, and expounds on that. And you can see it in the NFL too. You saw, the Eagles go for it on, any fourth down that's less than 5 yards, they're going for it. And I think there's a seed of that now that's growing.
He won state championships in Arkansas. Like he was like a legendary high school, like multiples. And
Yes.
so I messaged him when he got the job, and the first 2 weeks he was dominant. I was like, dang. But then when he started losing bad, I stopped messaging him because I don't want to jump in and be like, hey, what happened, buddy? Yeah. But I think you're right. Like there's something there. Maybe it's not, full balls to the wall like he was going
all the way.
Because you're seeing a lot of these NFL teams, and you're seeing like Staley with the Chargers, and a lot of these NFL guys who are fourth down. Where sometimes you go for it. When we were kids, they never went for it on fourth down.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
It was rare. You never went for two. You never. So I thought that was such an interesting TikTok that you did about him. Did you guys know that story at all?
No idea. Never heard of that.
Boom. Welcome to town.
I love it.
You're moving into the corner blitz.
There was a moment in the AFC Championship game where the Chiefs, and it was in the first quarter, they ran a Presbyterian college play. They threw it to Kelsey, who pitched it out to the running back coming out. I don't think it worked very well, but I saw that play, and I was like, that's Kevin Kelly. That's Presbyterian College. That was a staple of his offense.
Crazy. So I do want to talk about Jaden Rashada for a second. The recruit who was supposed to go to Florida, and then he was getting all this money, and then they're like, "Well, you ain't getting it." And then I think the contract I actually saw part of the contract too. Can you just from the beginning kind of let us know that story?
Yeah, so Jaden Rashada was, top 10 ranked quarterback in the country. As typical with those kind of guys, every school in the country was after him. He signed with Miami over the summer. It was kind of one of their top recruits. Then out of nowhere, in the middle of the year, he flipped his recruitment to Florida. He switched to going to Florida. And the rumors was, and we found out later that this was true because his contract was revealed, he signed a $13 million NIL contract with Florida. And it broke down where he would get $500,000 as soon as he signed the paperwork. And then he would get every month and like a $275,000 payment. And that would increase if he stayed there for all 4 years to like $400,000 a month. It was, an unbelievable deal that was bigger than anything that college football had seen up to that point. So fast forward to National Signing Day. Everyone's waiting for him to sign. He hasn't signed yet. Turns out on National Signing Day, he gets a letter from University of Florida, and it's just not technically University of Florida. It's the booster group that represents UF, but they tell him that the contract that he signed is null and void, and he's not going to be getting any payment. So now this kid has to decide: am I going to sign with Florida, or for nothing, and hopefully renegotiate the contract, or do I look elsewhere? But it's the 11th hour of recruiting. He doesn't really have a lot of other options. So he decides to sign with Florida, hopefully renegotiate, and that turns out terribly. So within a couple of weeks, he has to request to transfer from UF, 2 weeks after he signed a scholarship to play for them. He then hits the open market, and he ends up going to Arizona State. And it was just kind of a mess all around, and shows pretty much the worst case scenario of this new NIL structure and kind of what recruiting may look like going forward in the future.
What I saw too, because I will do NIL deals with players from University of Arkansas for different. If I have a TV show, I have them promote it. I'm trying to obviously be a supporter of the program. At the same time, I do have them do work for me. Even with like clothes and stuff, I have them promote. But what I saw in that contract for the first time, because except for mine, a lot of the NIL stuff is not known. It's just people talking about on message boards, speculating. But what I saw was that 13 or whatever the number was, $13 million deal was over 4 years. And there were a lot of, you got to be here for year 2. You got to be here for year 3. So it really wasn't a $13 million guaranteed deal, but it was if you play all 4 years and you continue, then, and by the way, it's still a lot of money and awesome.
A lot of money.
But it wasn't like the kid went to school and got 13 million, which by the way, went to school and got 0 million.
Yeah.
So
was that the tactic?
What?
Was that the move by Florida?
I don't think so. I don't think it's a collective, right? More that messed up, right?
Exactly. So, and that's where it gets kind of tricky, is because, Florida's not allowed, the University of Florida is not allowed to negotiate with this guy directly. So it's this third party collective made up of boosters. And so what people think has happened is that his entire contract, especially the upfront payment, was being backed by one booster who at the last second decided he wasn't going to give that money. And then the other thing with the Rashada story too is that in the summer, he was a top 10 ranked prospect. By signing day, he had dropped to a 4-star player. He was, not in the top 80 overall prospects. And so now you have this guy who, is the 85th ranked prospect getting paid millions and millions more than any other player, and so I think, they try to find a way to wiggle out of the contract, and, but this poor kid who thinks he's getting life-changing money finds out on the day he's supposed to sign that it all falls through.
Yeah, the fact that he was a 4-star, to me, when I first read it, was like, how's a 4-star getting this kind of money? But that's what it was. He wasn't. He was a 5-star quarterback.
Dang.
One final topic here, and something that I've been following, but I was at the house this weekend, and I saw the blurb pop up that said New Mexico State is suspending their basketball program. Now, there had already been some trouble there, but this was supposedly a different thing, and now I read that it's the hazing incident. I saw you talk a little bit about this too. So what do you know about this as of now?
Yeah, it's a crazy story. And like you said, New Mexico State has been involved, with a player that was involved in a pretty horrible shooting earlier in the year. And so, when news broke, and it was a late Friday night news dump, that not only, were they suspending coaches, they were suspending the entire program, with no date of when, basketball was going to resume at New Mexico State. And we're finding out more information now that it was a hazing incident, and a player who was a victim wanted to report the incident, but didn't want to have any charges pressed against his teammates. And so, when he spoke to the university about it, the president and, the board at New Mexico State decided to just suspend the entire program to kind of get a fresh start. And as a result, we've already seen a lot of the members of that team put their name in the transfer portal, and it looks like they're going to have to basically start from zero. It's basically a death penalty for New Mexico State basketball.
It was like balls and butt and stuff.
Weird stuff.
It was like, it's like, why? What? Like, why would you even do that?
Weird.
Like, look, here's the thing. Your TikTok is so good, and we got a pretty good audience that listens to this podcast. If I'm being, I'm not gonna be humble. We got a huge audience that listens to this podcast. It's a massive podcast. So I hope everybody, you go and you follow the Corner Blitz. You do such great work. In a few weeks, I'd love to have you back on. You just cover the most interesting stuff, and I'm a fan. And thank you for your time, and keep up the good work, Houston.
I love talking to you. I'm a big fan of yours as well, so I appreciate the time.
All right, Houston. See you, buddy.